Here we have with us today Sean Jameson. He is the general counsel at Spire Resources, where he manages legal, regulatory, and governmental affairs, compliance, and governance for the following companies: Spire Marketing, Spire STL Pipeline, Spire Storage West, Spire CNG, and Spire NGL. So he has a lot of free time. He's not doing much at all, it seems. But we do appreciate you taking a minute to share with us an update of what's going on, why it's happening, the impact it has to the local economy there. So with that, Sean, I will hand it over to you.
Josh, thank you. And Josh and Travis, thanks for the invite. You know, Spire, we always look for opportunities to engage with our partners across the spectrum. And so this is a really good opportunity to explain what has been happening on the Spire STL pipeline. So I am actually currently in Wyoming. So you mentioned one of those companies is Spire Storage West. So we have roughly 39 billion cubic feet of underground storage capacity here in Wyoming. You see some of the pictures behind me. And I just drove through a 2.5-hour snowstorm to get to our plant, which is not an easy place to get to here in Wyoming. But nonetheless, here I am. It is blizzarding here, so I know it's much warmer in St. Louis than what it is right now here in Wyoming. But let's talk about what this STL pipeline is doing, and why it was in so much jeopardy. And I'll tell you, I do have a set of slides here, but I really do want, I don't know if there's an opportunity for others to ask questions as I'm talking. I'm happy to answer them. Or if the format is to answer them at the end, I'm fine with that too. So I'll give you a rundown. If we can just go to the next slide. I don't think I'm in control of this one. Am I, Travis? No, okay, there you go. So the Spire STL pipeline is an interstate natural gas pipeline. So many of you in Missouri, particularly in the St. Louis region, are familiar with the name Spire, but you are familiar with the name Spire as it relates to the gas distribution company, your gas utility. You pay your bill, you receive gas at your house from Spire. So what you don't realize is that Spire actually has multiple other companies, and the kind of portfolio of companies that Josh kind of ticked off in the beginning of my responsibility really amount to what we call the gas related businesses. They are not the gas utility, but they are functions and businesses that actually support the natural gas industry or support the facilitation of reliable natural gas to your home. The Spire STL pipeline is a great example of that. Many years ago, and I don't mean like 5 years ago, decades ago, the very prudent people at the utility there in St. Louis said, we've got to think about the dynamic shifts that have been happening in population over the last 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And what has happened in St. Louis, that the city of St. Louis, that once had roughly 800,000 people in it, has now only about 300,000. It does not mean the region has had, negative population growth, but what the region has happened is many people have decided that they want to move from the city of St. Louis into some of the suburbs, whether that's St. Louis County, or more recently, even there's significant growth in St. Charles County. But what that does for a distribution system that is originally designed to serve a dense population city center, it created some they forecasted operational risk and concerns. Now remember, a utility, you getting gas at your home is critically important. And critically important in the sense that you want to go home, you do not want to think about whether you can turn your heat on. You do not want to think about whether you can actually turn your stove on to cook for your family. And you certainly don't want to think about whether you're going to have a hot shower in the morning when you wake up. And so the utility's job is to make sure that it provides reliable and affordable natural gas to all of its customers at all the time. And so in thinking about the ability to do that and what could the risk be, the prudent people at the utility said, we need additional infrastructure. We need a new source of natural gas coming in to help serve and bolster our service areas towards the western part of the St. Louis region. Again, I'm talking about St. Charles, I'm talking about, St. Louis County. And the options were, you know, continue to bring in gas from the eastern side of the St. Louis region, from older infrastructure, or develop new infrastructure to bring it from on the western side. What that means by bringing it in on the western side of the system and being able to funnel gas that way with high pressures, it meant that you could avoid, the utility could avoid significant and highly disruptive you know, gas main kind of projects that would disrupt your streets, your roads, and this was the easiest way to figure out how they can have another source. The Spire STL pipeline is that other source of bringing gas to that western side. But let me tell you one other thing. The St. Louis region had been dependent for 50 years, largely dependent, 90% reliant on gas production coming from one particular region. That one particular region is Texas and Oklahoma. And the pipeline that delivers from that region is the Enable MRT pipeline. Two issues that there's been significant shifts in the competition for molecules of gas coming from Texas and Oklahoma. Traditionally, everyone knew gas was produced in Texas and Oklahoma, and it needed to find a market, and that market was always to the north. Because of the large increase in LNG exports in this country, I don't know if many people know this, but we are the #2 natural gas exporter in the world now as a country. And the vast majority of those exporting facilities, those LNG exporting facilities, are located in the Gulf Coast region. So what that meant is the production, usually from Texas and Oklahoma, which traditionally had gone to the markets north, like St. Louis or other places, that gas now is going south to the Gulf Coast for export to other countries around the world. So that was a concern, saying, okay, wow, now there's a significant competition for that source, and we were 90% reliant on it. The second thing that I would say about that is, that pipeline, that one pipeline was traversing a seismic zone, and the seismic zone, the New Madrid fault, is something that the United States Geological Service has said that there is a 25 to 40% chance of an earthquake of a 6.0 magnitude or greater within the next 50 years. Now, if there's a 6.0 magnitude or greater earthquake, and it impacts the pipeline infrastructure such that gas would be offline for a period of time, being 90% reliant on that region would be problematic. The third thing I'll just say, and final thing I'll say about why there was a need to have an alternative source, is I talked about the fierce competition of molecules. I talked about the seismic zone. The third thing I like to point out is you never know when there's going to be a weather event, an extreme weather event. And I could have never, at the time with this pipeline was being proposed and ultimately approved by the federal government, I could have never forecasted that there would be Winter Storm Uri, that extreme February winter storm just from this year that resulted in significant gas production in Texas and Oklahoma going offline. Significant, more than 25% of the supply was offline. Now think about what I was saying, the fierce competition that is already there for the molecules. Significant gas went offline. That meant that gas was not able to get to the markets that it initially was intended. And I also would say that the governor of the state of Texas decided to issue an emergency embargo on exporting natural gas from the state of Texas to any other state in the United States. So if St. Louis was reliant on 90% reliant on its gas coming from Texas or even Oklahoma, then it would have had significant issues during just February winter storm. So part of this pipeline was really there to say all those things could happen. So let's mitigate that concern by ensuring that we were able to draw gas from another source. The two sources that this pipeline, Spire STL Pipeline, comes from. The first one is Appalachia. I think everyone knows that Appalachia, the Marcellus, is the most abundant gas producing region basin in the United States. It also has some of the most cost competitive molecules that you can buy. The other place this pipeline draws from is the Rockies. So you now have two alternative salt sources, Appalachia and the Rockies, to bring gas into the St. Louis region. The point here is something could happen in Texas that would mean that we could bring gas in from Appalachia or the Rockies. Something could happen in Appalachia, and it means we can also bring gas in from Texas and the Rockies. So the point is to have more than one option, because again, nobody wants to come home to not having heat, being able to cook for their family, or take a hot shower. So and so that's really important here. Let's go to the next slide, Travis. Yeah, so we went through this whole process where we certificated a pipeline. If you have never had to go through that process before, congratulations. I wish I was in that boat, but they are rigorous processes. And no matter what anyone says, the federal government has an obligation to take a look under the Natural Gas Act whether the pipeline's needed, and also whether the need for the pipeline outweighs the environmental impact from the pipeline, whether it's through construction or ongoing emissions to the extent there are any. So the process is not a quick one. It is at least a 2-year. It was at least a 2-year process in our instance. And these days, to get something through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, it could take upwards of 3 years to get a natural gas pipeline project permitted. Nonetheless, we did that, went through the process. We got our approval in 2018. We also got our approval to construct the pipeline, and we got our approval to place the pipeline in service in November of 2019. So from November 2019, this pipeline has been operating. It's been providing reliable service. There's been no safety concerns. There's been no major environmental concerns on this pipeline. It has done what it was designed to do, bringing gas from other regions. And during the February winter storm, we learned really something very important about this pipeline, is that it actually did exactly what I was saying that it was designed to do. It mitigated the risk of not being able to get gas out of Texas. And it also it meant for the St. Louis region that so many people did not have to worry about whether there was going to be reliable gas. I can tell you in other parts of the country, that was a concern. In Houston, that was a concern. In Dallas, that was a major concern. In Kansas City, Kansas, that was also a concern. So that was not a concern for the St. Louis region, in large part due to the Spire STL pipeline. The other thing that it served is it helped reduce costs, because as gas was becoming more scarce during that February winter storm, there was significant skyrocketing gas prices in the region, not just St. Louis region, throughout the country. And I can tell you that gas very quickly went from $3 an MMBTU in some places as high as $1,200 in MMBTU. You can imagine, just doing the math in your head, the cost impact that would have on ratepayers. So the estimation from Spire, Missouri, the utility, is that this Spire STL pipeline was able to save the region up to $300 million. So all that happened in February, and then June, the challenge to the 2018 authorization made its way through the courts. And the courts at that time were not able to think about what this pipeline just did for everyone in February of this year. The courts were looking at the process that FERC engaged in 2018. And the court decided that FERC did not do enough in its part, did not say that the pipeline was not needed. It said FERC needs to examine and take a harder look at whether this pipeline is needed. And so in doing so, it decided to remand the issue back to the FERC, saying, you need to now think about this longer. And when we're doing this, we're going to vacate this authorization you gave because FERC did not follow the right process. This is not Spire not following the right process. There's no indictment on that. The problem and the attack here is that FERC did not do enough to do its analysis through that 2-year period. That is the opinion of the court. Let's go to the next slide. And yeah, so what we've been able to fortunately operate this pipeline. So immediately when that happened, we kicked into emergency operations and emergency planning. And that emergency planning including how do we keep this pipeline operating while that federal agency, which is within their right, takes time to examine the key issues that are before them. And so while we did all that, we were able to get a temporary authorization from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to do just that. And our temporary authorization allows us, even to this day, to continue to operate. We first got a 90-day one, and then that was going to expire December 13th. And I think many people probably learned of concerns associated with that. Fortunately, on Friday, December 3rd, the FERC issued another authorization, said, this time we've looked at some of this information. We believe this pipeline is needed. We want this pipeline to continue to operate until we can make a determination on all the remand issues. And that's essentially what's happening right now. Let's go to the next slide, Travis. So why can't, many people have been asking why we can't go back to what was in place before. So when I said 90% reliant, think about your investment retirement portfolio. Think about how you may have had 90% of your shares in one company, and your retirement advisor, financial advisor said, hey, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to sell some of the stock and take the same amount of money that you have and diversify. And that's exactly what the utility, Spire Missouri, did. They diversified. And so they essentially, the analogy is that they sold that stock. Now, it does not mean that they can go and buy that stock when it's already bought by somebody else, that the people they sold it to. So in this instance, the pipeline capacity that was in place before, for all the reasons you don't want to have what the old status quo, you don't want to have that in place because of the reliability concerns. But it also wasn't something you could flip a switch and just go back to immediately, because that one pipeline I talked about, Enable MRT, that one pipeline had actually remarketed, essentially sold the capacity that Spire Missouri had, or at least part of the capacity that Spire Missouri had, to other parties. Spire Missouri still is the largest shipper on that pipeline, but it doesn't have as much as what it once did. Let's go to the next slide. So here's where I want to conclude. So you might be wondering, okay, great. Now that you have this temporary authorization, it's temporary. I picked up on that. It is not permanent. So right now we are engaging in discussions and proceedings at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that makes more of the case about why this pipeline is needed, not just for this winter, but it's needed on an ongoing long-term basis for the St. Louis region. For all the things I mentioned, whether cost savings, the reliability issues, we look at the St. Louis region as not necessarily being flat. There's growth in industrials. There's also, when you think about large industrials, may rely on capacity on pipelines themselves, but they rely largely on what they call recallable capacity that would not be available if there were a peak day. And so I look at this region as being actually short natural gas supply into the region. And because it's short, we believe this Spire STL pipeline is necessary to ensure this region has reliable natural gas and that it can continue to function and prosper in the way that it has been for so long. Happy to take any questions if there are. And if not, then I want to thank everyone for paying attention to this issue, because it is of great importance to the region and not just Spire. Thanks, Josh.
Sean, thank you so much. I'm glad that you made it up there safe. I'm sure the driving on I-80 and everything, I know that the wind alone during those storms can wreak havoc on you. Oh, you're muted there. Just one quick question, Sean. Do you have an idea? I know you had the temporary order. Do you know when the final order would come down?
Yeah, we don't have a timeline. Based on my experience, I would say we've got at least 6 months before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission can really dig into these issues. So I would say at least 6 months before we have a final authorization. But look, all the evidence out there right now is pointing to why this pipeline is so important for the region. And so to the extent that there is an adverse decision, that would be surprising to me. We certainly are very bullish about what the FERC can consider and what evidence is on the record that should lead to a conclusion that this pipeline is deemed to be necessary on the long term.
Okay. Well, hey, I appreciate it. I'm glad again that you made it safe. And I don't see any questions here from anyone. Okay.
Okay. Well, again, thanks everyone for paying attention to this issue and keeping this in mind for all of us. Appreciate your help.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. Before we move on to our next session, which is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Missouri, we'll hear a message from our sponsor.